In this lecture, I'm going to go over the number one thing which will enable you to quickly and easily do reporting and analytics. And that is starting with nicely structured, tidy data. Now, I fully appreciate that a lot of data doesn't actually come nicely structured or tidy in the first place, which is why so much of data science and data analytics is to do with cleaning up that data. Later on, we're going to dedicate entire lectures to methods for cleaning up and tidying data. However, to start with, we need to get an understanding of what tidy data looks like exactly. So I'm over here in a new blank spreadsheet, and I'm going to give you an example of what a tidy data format looks like, as well as going into some of the things like data types of different columns. So data in spreadsheets typically is going to come in a table type of format, rows and columns. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to start creating a few sample columns. So what are the different types of columns that we can get? Well, a typical column that we could get is something like an ID field. We can have, say, category fields. We could have date fields. And we have other things like metric fields, which display values, basically. So an example of an ID, maybe you have an ID, say, starting from the number 1, and let's just fill this down here. Just going to click this little fill option here to fill series, and it could be something like this, like an auto number that goes from the number 1 to 15. Now, one thing that's important with ID fields is that they are unique, and that enables you to do certain things like merging data with things like VLOOKUPs or joins. Another thing that's really important to pay attention to when you are looking at ID fields like this is the format of the data. Now, if I select a few of these cells here, you notice down the bottom of the screen, I've got an average, a count, and a sum. All of these have been able to automatically sum and produce me summary metrics on these numbers because they are stored as numbers in Excel. But not all IDs are necessarily stored as numbers, and there's an important difference here. So let me give you another example. Often systems may have an ID which looks like a number, but then contains a number of leading zeros. So for example, if I come over here and, well, first of all, if I try and add a number of leading zeros to this, it's actually just going to make the leading zeros disappear and convert it back to a number. However, if I come back over to here and I put a single quote in front and say type a number of zeros and type 1, you'll notice something different here. First of all, the data has aligned itself to the left instead of the right, and all the leading zeros are still in place. So if I select these two items now, you'd expect the number 1 and 2 to add up to 3. But you'll notice down here that my sum is only equal to 2. And the reason for that is that our first item here, ID number 00001, is stored as text and not a number. So if I fill this down, you notice if I select all of these, I don't even get a sum anymore. I get a count of the items instead, because you can't sum text fields. You can only sum number fields. Now, this is quite an important subtlety actually, because a lot of times when people's merges and their VLOOKUPs or joins don't work, it's because they're trying to join a text field to a numeric field and they don't actually match each other. So the number 1 is not equal to 00001. And so if you try to join it, it won't match. So the thing to be aware of in Excel is not everything that looks like a number is a number, and not everything that looks like text is text. And this is because you can actually take any type of data and format it in different ways so that the underlying value is still text or number, but then it's just displayed differently. So it does pay to look out for these subtle little clues, like where the data is able to aggregate at the bottom down here, or even the alignment of the data to see if it's aligning to the left, in which case it's normally text, although you could force numbers to align to the left side as well. Or if it's aligning to the right, which it's normally a number. But again, you can force the alignment either case anyway. So in the next column over here, I've got a category field. And so let's make up some sort of category. Small, medium, large. And because I have this pattern here now, if I select these three items and double click the fill handle, it'll repeat that pattern all the way down, all the way down my list. Categories are useful for grouping out data. This could be something else, like for instance, say a department that somebody works for. Maybe it's a country or some other field like that. Now, one of the mistakes that people often make with these type of fields is that instead of adding them in a tidy data format, which runs down the column like this, so each item is in a separate row, they take these values and they spread them out and say, let's say I copy those and I did a paste special transpose and I put them across the columns instead. This may look nice for reporting purposes, and later on down the line, we can quite easily get it back to this format. However, it makes it a lot more difficult to work with and will disable a lot of the features that I'm going to show you later. So when you come to these type of fields, do make sure to add them in this format instead. Let me delete those. Now let's come over to dates. So let me just start by entering today's date. Now a nice little shortcut for this is using the control semicolon key. So control semicolon is going to enter today's date into a cell for you. I'm going to hit enter. I have the date here. And let me fill this down. So I'm going to take this, double click the fill handle, and you'll notice that this is automatically incremented by one day at a time. So I've got the second, I've got the third, I've got the fourth. And if I click this option here, I have a whole range of different options. So I can actually increment this, say, by just by weekdays. And this will, notice here, we've skipped the third and the fourth because the third and the fourth are Saturday and Sunday. If I come down here again, I can also increment this by months. So I'm going up 1 month at a time. And other options include year, flash fill, and a bunch of other options as well. Now you notice here, if I select all of these numbers, that we are able to summarize them. And the reason for that is that dates inside of Excel are actually stored as numbers. So I've got an average here, I've got a count, and I've got a sum. If I click on the number format, so this is going to be the comma style applied to all of my dates here, you'll notice that all of these dates here are 43,000 something. Now, that number is actually 43,000 days from the 1st of January 1900. The decimal place here is for the time. So if you're halfway through the day, it's going to show 0.5. If you've completed a full day, you're going to be at 1. I don't have any time on here, so that's why this is not showing up. The nice thing about being in this format is that you can easily do normal mathematical calculations on these, like subtracting a couple of dates from each other to figure out how many days are in between them. Taking a date and then adding a number to see how many, what day that would get you to in the future. Now, one of the mistakes that people often make is that they want their dates to be in a very specific format to look pretty. And so maybe if I come over here, I could do something like I could add, say, Monday, and I could take this value and I could fill this down, and you'll see that it automatically increments to each of the days of the week for me. I can do the same thing with months, so January. And I get all the different months. Now, by using these values here, these values are basically text, and so they become more of a categorical field rather than a date field, and they become much more difficult to work with. by storing things as a proper date format, we can always get back to these formats if we need to, simply by changing the way that our dates are actually displayed. So if I come back over to my date fields again here, I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to go to format cells, which is just out of screen. Let me click it up here. So format cells. The shortcut key for this is Control 1 if you're into your shortcut keys. So here I've currently got it formatted as accounting. I've also got options for dates, and we have a number of options here for seeing all of the different date types. You can get a lot more control over this though by simply going to custom. So if I come over to here, we can see that we have this format here, and this I think makes quite a bit of sense. DD, MM, YYY. As you can guess, this is day, month, and year. I've got a leading 0 in front of my day and my month. So if I come over to here and I delete one of the D's, you drop that leading 0 and it just becomes the second. If I add another D, I get that leading 0 back. If I add 3 D's, I end up with Friday. 4 D's, I end up with the full word Friday. If I want the name of the day as well as the date, I can add, say, DD space D, and I'll get Friday the 2nd. If I don't like these slashes, I can replace those. I can make it a space, or I can make it a dash. For the month here, again, right now we've got 2 M's for 03. I'll make it 1 M, it drops the leading 0. 2 M's get the leading 0 back. 3 M's, you get the short form date. 4 M's, you get the full sort of month name. And 5 M's, you actually get just the first letter of the month, which can also be quite handy as well. Let me just delete a few of those there. For the year, there's really just 2 options. So I can either have 2 Y's, which will just show 18, or if I add 3 or 4 Y's back to this, then it's going to show the full 4-digit 2018. I'm going to click OK, and you can see that all of those have been formatted. But even though they have this format, which makes it nice and easy to read, the underlying data is still stored as a number or a proper date format, which means we still have all the average and count and sums down the bottom here. The last column I'm going to add to this is a metrics column. So over here, this is basically a numeric field, something that we're going to add up. So this could be, say, sales value, right? So let's say over here we have $1,000 worth of sales. Oops. In the next cell down, let's say we'll have 1,500. And notice here, I've got an increment of 500. Now there's already a pattern here, so if I fill this down by double clicking the fill handle, this will automatically increment by 500, which is a nice little feature. So again, because these are numeric fields, I can see the summaries down here, average, count, sum. We can also get additional summaries of our metrics by right-clicking here. So for instance here, I can also add the minimum and maximum, and you can see those are displaying down here like so. Now, as mentioned earlier with the ID column, it's very important to keep an eye on whether your numeric values are actually being stored as numeric values, because otherwise you won't be able to sum them up properly. So for example, if I come over here to one of my values, and as mentioned in the ID example, if I put a single quote in front of these, I'll be able to turn this into text. Now you'll notice that these values, they don't all sum up. Well, they sum up excluding this 4,500, which has been aligned to the left. So let me just undo that there. So now that we have all of our data in place here, let me point out a few other things that make this tidy data. First of all, we have 4 different columns here, and each column has to have its own unique name. So for example, if I wanted another date column, you wouldn't add 2 columns called date. So if you were referencing that column later on, you would know which column you actually need to reference. The other thing that's important about this is that there are no blank columns and there are no blank rows. A lot of these things are usually added for formatting purposes. But again, when you are setting up your data, you have to make sure that it is a nice, tidy format, which is going to be easy to reference by either your formulas if you're getting up to the formula kind of stage, or basically all the automatic features inside of Excel, which will render everything for you. A lot of these things will only work well if you have your tidy data format.